Assalamu alaikum. I know this is a catchy title and I know you think this is clickbait, but I assure you it's a very serious question. The question is how to circumcise a she cow. This question, inshallah, is something we will deal with in this segment in a very, very serious way, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. This question, how to circumcise a she cow, is part of this series that we are continuing with, which is the series about dhikr, the Quranic stories and the parables. And the series is titled Why No Stories Equal No Quran. This is part 2.2. In this segment, inshallah, we will continue the discourse on dhikr as we mentioned. We will also continue providing examples of the Abrahamic locution, the divine lexicon that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala employed within the Quran, especially in the stories and the parables, which is al-dhikr. The scene of the slaughtering of the cow, which is the marquee story in Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah number 2, is something we will cover in full in this segment. We will also present a new concept, the concept of tafsil, something you have never heard about before. This is a significant Quranic science that most scholars totally ignore or are not even aware exists according to the Quran. As usual, we have a lot of gifts. We have 9 gifts. So inshallah, stay with us all the way to the end, because I promise you the final gift is really stunning. It's absolutely worth your patience and worth your time. It is something that absolutely no one has told you about before. I know these segments are long, and I know these segments are packed with information. And some of you have complained that these segments are long and therefore you prefer to make them shorter. The problem is that if we make them shorter, there will be a lot of disconnection among the segments. So we try to make the segments as small as possible and yet as consistent and coherent as possible. We encourage you to please watch the prior parts of this series so that you make the most out of this segment. I remind you that this is an academic presentation. This is not for entertainment. As you know, we use the organic Quranic methodology, which means that this methodology was extracted from within the Quran itself. We did not make it up. We don't make up our own methodology. That has nothing to do with the Quran. We follow the instructions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us so that we make sure that we follow the steps, we follow the principles, we use the vocabulary, we apply the same guidelines that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in the Quran so that we extract the meanings and ready ourselves to receive the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to receive the understanding from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to receive al-ma', the divine rain that comes from as-samawat, which is, as we explained before, the true layers of understanding of the Quran. We also apply the concept of nested interpretation. We're going to apply it again in this segment. But most of all, we extract the Abrahamic locution, the terms and the vocabulary and the words and the expressions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained, and we apply them to understand the other ayat of the Quran. I encourage you highly to please not make comments or ask questions unless you have watched the whole segment. Just a few reminders from prior segments, terms and vocabulary that we have defined and used extensively in prior segments. The word dhabaha, we covered it fully in a video called Did God Order Ibrahim to Slaughter His Son? And in that video, we clearly defined it as an incision, referring within the Abrahamic locution to the concept of circumcision. So I encourage you to watch that video if you want to listen or to watch the evidence for this concept. The word al-jahilin is a very specific, precise term that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used in Surah Hud, specifically in the story of Nuh. We covered it in the video, which is the first part of this series. The video is called What Does the Story of Nuh's Son Teach Us About the Whole Quran and About Supplication? Another reminder, the word amilu salihat is an innocent sounding word, but it's actually a very precise expression Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses consistently throughout the whole Quran, and it means toiling on the divine lexicon, toiling on the divine or in accordance with the divine lexicon, the Abrahamic locution. In other words, working through the ayat, extracting the specific terms and the meanings of these terms and the indications, and then applying them throughout the rest of the Quran. This is from the same video titled, What Does the Story of Nuh's Son Teach Us About the Whole Quran and About Supplication? Finally, the word Jannat refers to the concealed realms of understanding. In other words, what Allah has given you of understanding of the Quran. Something very private, very special, very unique, almost secret. Not many people have had access to that type of understanding. We've talked about it again in many other segments before. It refers to the concealed type of understanding within the Quran. And the word ard means scripture, as we said, but sometimes, as we see, it is used within contexts that are clearly referring to earth or to land or to soil, etc. And the context gives us a clear indication. Most of the 444 references to the word ard in the Quran usually refers to the scripture, the actual text of the Quran. And of course, the same ard, the same term is used in prior stories of people before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in those stories, ard refers to their scripture, etc. So we continue, inshallah, with the main story, the marquee story in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's a story about slaughtering the cow. I'm going to read it in Arabic and then translate it as best as we can, and then we're going to dive into a lot of details, inshallah. So I hope you stay awake and you really stay focused on every single word, because it's a very interesting story. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, A'udhu billahi min shaitan rajim, in Surah Al-Baqarah, number 2, ayah 67. Ayah 67. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً. Musa said to his community, remember قَوْمِهِ, that means his community, and we've defined this in prior segments. The word قَوْم, that means a group of people who have something in common with the character in question. So in this case, the character in question is Musa, قَوْمِهِ, his community or his people. So it's not just a generic his people. There are some things in common between Musa and this group of people. And in this case, of course, they lived together or they lived in the same place. So Musa is telling them, Allah commands you, أن تذبحوا, and I'm going to leave it untranslated, just transliterated for now, because you're going to see this is the focal point of the whole story. This is what the whole story is all about, that one word. Of course, it's more than that, but at least we're going to start with that one word. And تذبحوا, تذبحوا, commonly translated as slaughtered or sacrificed, and we're going to see it doesn't do it justice to just give it these two specific translations. It's more than that. And تذبحوا بقرة, and تذبحوا بقرة, تذبحوا a cow. So, of course, now if you put yourself in their shoes, in the shoes of Musa's people, of Musa's community, you have been trained to understand the Abrahamic locution, because remember, the Israelites had the books that they inherited through Yusuf, and before Yusuf, Yaqub, and before Yaqub, Ibrahim, and Ibrahim used this locution, and therefore we're talking about the same locution. So this group of people is referring or trying to understand what Musa said using their mental framework of that Abrahamic locution. And thus comes the controversy. So their answer is, do you take us in ridicule? Are you mocking us? Are you playing with us? Are you playing games with the words when you talk to us, Musa? Are you perverting our divine lexicon? Why? Because they understood it that Musa is telling them, go ahead and circumcise a female cow. And it's funny if you understand it that way. So they assumed, or they were questioning, whether or not Musa was ridiculing them. So he answered, I seek refuge in Allah against being among al-jahilin. قَالَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ أَنْ أَكُونَ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ. Of course, because the word al-jahilin, as we saw from the prior video about the story of Nuh and his son, the word al-jahilin, as we defined it very clearly in that context, means those who pervert the divine lexicon, those who abuse or misuse or even don't understand the words they're using, assuming they're part of the divine lexicon. So that word, al-jahilin, is referring to people who ignore or don't understand or pervert the divine lexicon. So that's where the challenge is. This is the sort of the comedic setup between Musa and his people. And we're going to see it's a lot more than comedic. It's not just for fun. It's a very sinister response from the people of Musa. So to summarize, Musa was telling them, go ahead and slaughter a cow, and they understood it to mean circumcise a she-cow, a female cow, which is really funny. But we will see, inshallah, how this story develops. Ayah number 68 continues, قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا فارض ولا بكر عوان بين ذلك فافعلوا ما تؤمرون. They said, call upon your Lord on our behalf to identify in accordance with our ways what it is, what that cow is. He says, it is a cow which is neither old nor virgin, but medium between those two ends. So do what you are commanded. So now we move to ayah number 69. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما لونها قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة صفراء فاقع لونها تسر الناظرين. They said, call upon your Lord on our behalf to identify in accordance with our ways what her color is. He says, it is a yellow cow, bright in color, pleasing to the observers. We move on to ayah number 70. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا ما هي إن البقرة تشابه علينا وإنا إن شاء الله لمهتدون. They said, call upon your Lord on our behalf to identify in accordance with our ways what it is. Indeed, the cattle have caused confusion to us. But we assure you, they continue, we assure you, Allah willing, we are seeking to be guided. And then the final ayah, ayah number 71. قال إنه يقول إنها بقرة لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها قالوا الآن جئت بالحق فذبحوها وما كادوا يفعلون. He says it is a cow that's neither submissive to excite or plow the earth, nor to irrigate the cultivated crops, one free from ownership disputes, with no blemish upon her. They said, now you have come with the truth. And they slaughtered her, but they almost did not. Now, as you see, I crossed this last part because there's a whole story, and this is going to consume a significant part of this segment to understand these last three words, وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. So we're going to analyze specific aspects of this story, one piece at a time, very slowly, so that we can really understand what's going on in this story and why it is so significant, why it became the marquee story. So let's start from the top again, and we need to analyze a few things at a time. So first, I made some colors so that you can recognize exactly the Arabic versus the English. So we talked about تذبح بقرة. They understood it in one way. He, Musa, was intending it in another way, intending it as literally slaughter a cow. And we're going to see why. And we're going to see the evidence to what I'm saying. I'm making a claim. You should be questioning it. But I ask you to be patient. Stick with us. And you're going to see exactly the full details. So he said, you should slaughter a cow. And then they asked, are you perverting the divine lexicon? Are you taking us in ridicule? The word or the expression that's used, أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا, which is highlighted in green right here, is an expression you should go and search throughout the whole Quran, because you will learn amazing things when you discover that this exact expression is used about certain people who actually did this with Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, with other prophets. So you will learn that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to this word, أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا, He's referring back to this story. In other words, whenever you see it somewhere else, أَتَتَّخِذُنَا هُزُوًا or اتَّخَذُوهُمْ هُزُوًا, you will need to do a nested interpretation, at least mentally. Now that Dr. Hani has explained this story to you, you will know exactly what that means. That means somebody is perverting the divine lexicon. Somebody is abusing one or more terms in the divine lexicon, the Abrahamic locution. So therefore, this is how it's used in the context in here, to allow us to learn it, to allow us to provide a context to formally define this expression. Then Musa said, قَالَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ أَنْ أَكُونَ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ. We've talked about مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ before from the story of Nuh and his son, as I explained a little earlier. Now we move to the second ayah, 68. قَالُوا ادْعُوا لَنَا رَبَّكَ. This is the first thing we notice. They use the word رَبَّكَ, your Lord. Why didn't they say Allah? Why didn't they say ask Allah? Call Allah on our behalf. They used Rabbaka, your Lord. That's the first indication that something not quite right is going on. So we have to pay attention. Remember the virgin eyes. You keep your eyes wide open as you're observing everything you're reading in the text of the Quran. The second observation is that there are two lana. The first lana here and the second lana here. I highlighted one of them in green and the first one I did not highlight. Id'u lana rabbaka. Call upon your Lord on our behalf. So this lana right here means on our behalf, for us, on our behalf. Why do we need a second lana again? So in other words, those of you who are Arab speakers will recognize immediately that one of them, if you take it out, the meaning does not change. So if you say, Id'u rabbaka yubayyin lana, call your Lord to show us or to express to us, the meaning is fine. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took out this one, and the ayah would be, قالوا ادعوا لنا ربك يبين ما هي, call upon your Lord on our behalf to identify what it is, that would also stand. That's fine. So why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reported this story not just in one ayah, and also this ayah, and also in this ayah, meaning 3 times repeated to bring to our attention that something is going on here. So what is it? And the quick answer, and we're not going to be able to demonstrate it in this video, inshallah, we will demonstrate it in other videos. But the quick answer is they were expecting the answer to come in accordance to what they were expecting. Remember, in their mind, they're subjecting Musa to a test already, because they already accused him of taking them in ridicule. Are you really a prophet? Are you really a messenger? And yet you don't know what tadhbahu mean? We know the story of Ibrahim. Tadhbahu means circumcise. How come you're using the word circumcise with a she cow, with a female cow? Of course, a cow is female, we know that, but I'm just stressing the point to illustrate the image in your mind. So they were assuming that Musa should use the Abrahamic locution, the specific indication of the word tadhbahu, correctly, even when he's asking them to slaughter a cow. So in accordance with our ways, that means in accordance to what we're used to of the Abrahamic locution. And again, this proves that the idea of the Abrahamic locution that we keep talking about in this channel is real. It actually existed during the time of Musa and even before that, as we shall see, and we have demonstrated plenty of times in the case of the story of Yusuf and others, as we will see inshallah. So he says it's a cow which is neither old nor virgin, but medium between that, so do what you are commanded. فَفْعَلُوا مَا تُؤْمَرُونَ. So this point in here, this tu'marun, what you are commanded, has a question mark on it. We will see exactly why Musa is using that word. But for now, we understand already that there is some sort of a challenge, some sort of a contention between Musa and his people. And the heart of the contention is that they're expecting him to use the Abrahamic locution, and he seems to be not using the Abrahamic locution. So this is the issue that we're trying to deal with, and this is what the story is relaying to us so far. So we go to another point from the second ayah. The question they asked him is mahiya, what is it? Not which one specifically. So they're asking about the kind of cows they should slaughter. They are expected slaughter or circumcise, or They're still playing tricks with him. They're still trying to pull his leg, so to speak, to see if he really knows what he's talking about, or he's just throwing terms willy-nilly without really understanding what they mean. So you have to pay attention to everything in the story. So the fact that they asked ma hiya, or what it is, instead of saying which one, is indicating that they have something in mind. Okay, the next ayah 69. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا. Again, the exact same expression. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا. 3 times. قالوا ادع لنا ربك يبين لنا. 3 times in a row, exactly the same expression. That means they're not satisfied with his first answer. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, pay attention, pay attention. Look, they're playing games. They're still using the same key expression to egg Musa alayhi salam, to tell him there's something you don't know. Again, try again, try again, try again. That's what they're doing. So the third ayah, ayah number 69, the same thing, yubayyin lana, in accordance with our ways, meaning in accordance with the Abrahamic locution. You use the term tazbah in the wrong way, or tazbahu, and now we want to make sure you really know our ways, meaning the Abrahamic locution that was given to Ibrahim and that we anticipated every messenger and prophet to use. So they're testing him. This is what they're doing. So the fourth ayah, the same way, ayah number 70. And now we are introduced to a brand new concept, tashabaha alayna. They said the cattle, this is the plural, al-baqar, it's no longer one. Now they're using plural, al-baqar, the cattle, and as you know, the cattle is the plural of cows and bulls, etc. The cattle have caused confusion to us. It literally says confusion upon us. It has brought confusion upon us. So now they're using a very specific terminology, and you need to pay attention. They did not say that all cows look alike. Unfortunately, most of the translators used that type of idea in their translations. That's not what they said. That's not what the Quran tells us they said. They said, cattle has brought confusion upon us. How do we know? The preposition ala, whenever it occurs, it indicates there's something going on in terms of new information to the people being discussed. So in this case, tashabaha alayna, that means its appearance seems similar, and this is causing us new information. This is causing us confusion. We can't make out the difference between this one and that one. That's what the meaning is of tashabaha alayna. And this is different than tashabaha, as we shall see. This is different than tashabaha, which means it looks alike. They're not saying they look alike. They're saying this is causing confusion to us. And that's why we cannot make up our mind and decide which cow to slaughter. At least this is the argument they're putting forward. And they're using the Abrahamic locution. Musa is not using the Abrahamic locution. And that's why they keep asking him, give us more information. Go request more information. Go call upon your Lord to get us information according to our way. This is the significance of lana. This is the significance of the second lana, which occurs 3 times, and I highlighted in green, as you see. So therefore, when they use tashabaha alayna, they're using the Abrahamic locution to see if Musa understands. They're still testing Musa. I know you don't believe it yet. Just be patient. You're going to see it with your own eyes, and you're going to recognize it. And then they continue, وَإِنَّا إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَمُهْتَدُونَ وَإِنَّا إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَمُهْتَدُونَ. But we assure you that, Allah willing, we are seeking to be guided. So they're claiming that they're seeking to be guided, where in reality they're testing Musa. You're going to see it. So the last ayah, finally, Musa gives them details that indicates that really he's not talking about the Abrahamic locution. He's not talking about a scriptural type of interpretation. He's just telling them, get a cow that is easy enough for you to handle, to process, slaughter it, and eat it. And why do I say eat it? And we're going to see exactly. So this is the context of the story. And now I really need you to pay attention, because this is understanding the story, the real story, why it's happening. We're not done, by the way. We're going to come back to this part that I crossed in here, and we're going to talk a lot about it. So just be patient. So remember in our video called Why Are Only 5 Fruit Types Mentioned in the Quran, we referred to this ayah number 61. Wait, ayah 61. This came just a few verses before the beginning of the story of the cow. So is it related to it? Of course it's related to it. How do we know? We know because there's this marking right here. Call upon your Lord. فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ. It's exactly the same marking that is in 3 sequential ayat in the story of the cow. فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ. فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ. فَادْعُ لَنَا رَبَّكَ. 3 times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it in the story of the cow, and He put it a few ayat before to link the 2 parts of Surah Al-Baqarah. You cannot miss it unless you're totally absent-minded. If you are trying to interpret the Quran 1 ayah at a time, or you're trying to interpret the Quran 1 story at a time, you will not get it. But if you're looking for these markings, immediately you will know these stories are related. So in ayah 61, they're talking about food. They're talking about produce, cucurbits, grains, legumes, and onions, etc. They're talking about baqliha, qithaiha, fumiha, adasiha, wa basaliha. So of course, when Musa came to this part of the story, and now we understand this is at the time after their exodus. So Musa is responding to them by saying, if you're looking for food, go slaughter a cow. So I'm going to use the language of the non-Abrahamic locution to respond to you. But if you are insisting on the Abrahamic locution language in this ayah 61, then you shouldn't even ask, because you know I'm a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it turned out that Musa was mocking them and they were mocking him. Musa understood they were playing games with him, and they in turn understood that Musa was playing games with them, because they asked this silly question in ayah 61. They asked for produce, cucurbits, grains, legumes, etc. So we're clear now that we're talking about Abrahamic locution. We're talking about linguistics. We're talking about how these people were using the words. What do these words mean? And there is this contest going on between Musa and these people. Remember, these people did not believe. We know from Surah Al-Qasas that most of his people did not believe him. Most of his people accused him of magic, accused him of whatever, lying, having a bad character. They even accused other things, really bad things about him. But Musa insisted that he was a messenger from Allah even after the Exodus. So this story is happening after the Exodus. And again, this story with the cow is happening after the Exodus. So Musa is still struggling to convince them, number one, that he's real messenger. Number two, he's still trying to convince them that he understands the divine lexicon that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Ibrahim, from Ibrahim to Yaqub and Yusuf, etc. So that's the context of the whole story. So now we understand that Musa was simply telling them to slaughter a cow for food. It has nothing to do with religious sacrifice. You asked for grains and onions and lentils and so on. Go slaughter a cow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, if that's what you want the lower things, go slaughter a cow. Go eat regular food. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising you a much higher type of sustenance, and you're insisting on the low things, the things that are close to the ground. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is promising you these fruit trees that we discussed in that video about mango and pineapple, and you're insisting on the lower things. That's what it means. قَالَ اهْبِطُوا. Watch this in here. قَالَ أَتَسْتَبْدِلُونَ الَّذِي هُوَ أَدْنَى بِالَّذِي هُوَ خَيْرٌ. If that's what you want, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, go eat a cow. Go slaughter a cow and eat it. So it's really about food, but it's not what we think. It's not a command to sacrifice. It has nothing to do with what the interpreters said, that this is about which specific type of cow and the 613 elements and aspects of Sharia, of the Masoretic law, etc., etc. Has nothing to do with that. It's a contest about linguistics, and this is exactly what the story is all about. So we're going to continue because there is a lot more details in here. So there is no relationship to the religious discourse. There is no issue regarding the specifics of Sharia. And we learn that the marking between the two paragraphs of the same surah is absolutely clear. The question is, how did they miss it? How did they not link these two parts? We introduce a new concept here, which is the difference between how one group used the word تذبحوا and how Musa alayhi salam used the word تذبحوا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that they understood the word تذبحوا either with good intention or with bad intention to be referring to an Abrahamic locution term, whereas in reality Musa alayhi salam was telling them, that's the layer of understanding you're at. I'm going to respond to you without talking about Abrahamic locution. So I'm using the word تذبحوا in the real sense, slaughtering, cutting the throat of that cow. And that's where they switched, and now all of a sudden they were challenging Musa alayhi salam. So the context is very clear that Musa was talking about a she cow, a female cow. We understand that his reference is not the Abrahamic locution. His reference is the common language of his people. They, on the other hand, wanted to make fun of Musa, so they switched back to the Abrahamic locution, saying, how come you're using that word? We know this word means something else. How come you don't use that other word? The same thing with al-ard, the last ayah, which is ayah 71 in the story. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that Musa said, تُثِيرُ الْأَرْض. It is tilling the earth, it is exciting the earth, sort of turning the earth over. So they used to use the cows, as you know, the bulls and the cows, to till the earth. So it's clearly not referring to scripture. So Musa was not talking Abrahamic locution. He was clearly talking common everyday type of language. And that's how we know the context of that word in that ayah to mean earth, land, soil, not the scripture. I hope this is clear. So now the conclusion or the exact point of the whole story, at least that part of the story, is that the common language is not the same as the divine lexicon, as the Abrahamic locution. There is a tension between the two, and you have to know which context is being used where. The fact that this story is the marquee for the whole Surah Al-Baqarah, which is the largest surah and the first surah after Al-Fatiha in the Quran, tells us something really huge, something very important. It tells us, pay attention to everything about the lexicon and about the Abrahamic locution throughout the whole Quran. It is also a lesson in methodological use of the Abrahamic locution vocabulary for interpreting the scripture and for communicating with Allah. So as we saw before in part 1 of this series, when we talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah gave us this language. Allah gave us this lexicon, this vocabulary, and we should use it properly. We should not be mocking it. We should not be using it in ridicule. We should not make up our own words and ask Allah to understand according to our terms. Yes, Allah understands our intention, but that's not the best way of devoting ourselves, of asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ways that He taught us. That would be a much better, more preferred way of making those supplications. So it is not necessarily the same language used for everyday conversations, even by Musa. So this language is for the special relationship of interpreting the scriptures and for asking and supplicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I hope this is very clear. So now we enter a new domain. We talked about the divine lexicon. We said it's very precise. The examples that we saw earlier, tashabaha versus tashabaha alayna. Just want to remind you, there's something called phrasal verbs. Phrasal verbs in the language, any language, including English and Arabic and so on and so forth, includes adding a preposition or a particle after a verb. So for example, when I say look versus I say look down versus I say look up, every one of those three things means something different. When I say pull or pull up or pull down, again, these things mean something different depending on which preposition I use after the verb. Sit versus sit out versus sit in. etc. So when I say tashabaha, that means things look similar. But when I say tashabaha alayna, it doesn't mean they look similar. It means more. It means they look similar and they cause confusion. So the focal point of this expression right here, tashabaha alayna, is that they are confusing to us. It's different than similar appearance. Now, we're going to apply this to just one case. Inshallah, in the next segment that's coming after this one, we're going to discuss this exact issue to understand a very, very important ayah from Surah Ali Imran, ayah number 7. So inshallah, you will look for that segment that will come soon, inshallah. But in this segment, we want to discuss this ayah right here, ayah number 25, again from Surah Al-Baqarah. وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ أَنَّ لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ كُلَّمَا رُزِقُوا فِيهَا مِنْ ثَمَرَةٍ رِزْقًا قالوا هذا الذي رزقنا من قبل وأتوا به متشابها ولهم فيها أزواج مطهرة وهم فيها خالدون. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشِّرْ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, those who attained to belief and continue to attain to belief and toiled in accordance with the divine lexicon. So they're working the ayat, they're working the scripture, they're trying to extract the terminology, the precise terminology of the divine lexicon, the Abrahamic locution, that to them belong concealed abodes of understanding. Again, Jannat, we talked about this many times before. Tajri min tahtiha al-anhar. This one I'm going to leave beneath which rivers flow. I'm going to leave it like that. This is not a sufficient interpretation. There's a lot more to this, inshallah. We will discuss it in the future, so just be patient. Allow this one to pass. We're not going to cover this one in this segment. Every time they are sustained within them, I mean within the Jannat, with fruits, they say, this is what we have been sustained with before. هَذَا الَّذِي رُزِقْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِ. This is what Allah gave us before in terms of rizq. We're not talking about food. We're not talking about eating. We're talking about sustenance in terms of divine guidance. And they continue, the same group of people are saying, and they were beaten by the similarity of its appearance. I'm going to take it very slow because you really need to understand this one. So this is the same group of people. قالوا, right here. قالوا هذا الذي رزقنا من قبل. This is what we have been sustained with before. And they continue saying, وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا. Why am I saying this? Because if you go back in the ayat, remember this is ayah number 25. If you go earlier to 23, 24, you see that those two ayat, 23 and 24, the ones preceding this one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about those who have doubt, fi raib, those who are doubting. So the group of people who accept, meaning who believe and do as-salihat, recognize that those who have doubt, meaning those in ayah 23, 24, have been beaten or have been outdone or have been deluded by the similarity of its appearance. The appearance of what? The appearance of everything they are given, every thamara, all the fruits they are given, the sustenance they are given. In other words, the scripture, remember, عَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, work and toil on the scripture, on the ayat of the scripture. Therefore, the context is clearly talking about the scripture, the Quran in this case. So those who are working on the Quran immediately recognize that those who have doubt have been outdone, deluded, confused by the similarity of the appearance. The appearance of what? The appearance of the stories of the Quran compared to other stories. Now this is, as we said many times before, this is appearance only at the surface. When you dig down, you immediately find all sorts of semantics and meanings that are beyond what the surface implies. Now we continue with the ayah, وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. And to them, in the concealed abodes of understanding, are available pristine pairs, أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ. I want to highlight this one because many of you still do not understand the concept of hur and they question that sometimes hur are mentioned in association with the verb zawj or zawajnahum. In the Quran, the word zawj or zawajnahum implies that we match them, we pair them up. We allowed one person to understand something. So that pairing is called zawj. So azwajum mutahhara, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about pristine pairs. Pairs of what? Pairs of the divine lexicon terms and their indications. So every time we define a lexicon vocabulary term, an Abrahamic locution term, such as jannat or ard or tashabaha or amilu salihat, those are terms from the Abrahamic locution. We match them with a specific indication that becomes azwajum mutahhara, that becomes pairs that are pristine, that means purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means you can count on this indication because it came from a clear contextual evidence that we presented using the Quranic analysis that we're doing, the Quranic methodology. So it becomes pristine pairs. So this is the concept of pristine pairs. Zawj or azwaj or zawajnahum. In Jannat, people who are muttaqoon, who are living in Jannat, in the understanding of these ayat, in the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to understand, then we become very clear. And finally, the last part of this ayah, وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ, and they are khalidun, there within. I'm going to leave this word just like Jannat, tajri min tahtiha al-anhar, this expression. I'm not going to get into it in this segment. Inshallah, in a future segment, we will get to it. Khalidun, I'm going to leave it as it is. We will discuss it in a future segment, inshallah. So finally, some of you who are Arabic speakers are probably pulling their hairs right now and they're questioning whether or not I know anything about Arabic. And yes, I know you are looking at this ayah right here, and specifically this expression, وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا. أُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا, you're saying they were given this in a way that makes it similar. And yes, that meaning is there. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word utu, the verb utu, in a different way, in a couple of other places. And that's why we have to pay attention. So go back and verify ayah 1626 and ayah 59:2, and you're going to see that utu or ata sometimes means they were overpowered, they were beaten, they were outdone, they were outplayed. And therefore, I encourage you to go check ayat 1626 and 59:2 to confirm that this is exactly the meaning that we're relying on to interpret وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا. So what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us in here? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us the similarity in appearance between the various stories in the Quran compared with the stories from other corrupted versions of the scripture is intentional, is done on purpose. So if you approach the Quran thinking that it does have some similarities and that the Quran brought some of these stories, you're going to be deluded. You're going to be outdone by your own false assumption. This is exactly what this part of the ayah is telling us. They were beaten, they were outdone, they were deluded by the similarity of its appearance, the appearance of these stories. Again, we're going to dive a lot more in the future segment, inshallah, when we talk about ayah 7 of Surah Ali Imran. Very well. So now we get into some gifts. Gift number 1, the apparent similarities in the Quranic stories is intentional. It is intended to delude the doubters. This is exactly what ayah 25 demonstrates. Now we continue with gift number 2. We said that the story of the cow that was supposed to be circumcised, is really a story about confusion regarding the Abrahamic lexicon, the Abrahamic locution, the divine lexicon that these people assumed and Musa was not necessarily using. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not leave it at that. Allah included an exercise within that story. And here's something absolutely stunning and beautiful. And inshallah you will pay attention as we go through all of the analysis and the details. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of ayah 71, let me go up again so you can see exactly where we are in the story. So at the bottom of the story, the very last four words, فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. فَذَبَحُوهَا, they slaughtered her. وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. If you look up all the translations say, but they almost did not, or they barely did, or they were not really doing it with goodwill, and etc. We're going to see. So we'll continue with this analysis. فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. Now, if you take these words literally and you try to interpret them literally, here's what they say. They say, they slaughtered her, ذَبَحُوهَا, وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. These three words are translated, if you do the literal translation, meaning you don't interject any kind of subjective interference in the translation process or the interpretation process, what these three words literally say, and they did not almost do it. Think about this. They did not almost do it. They did not almost do it. So what is the Quran saying? What does that mean? They did not almost do it. Did they do it or not? Or they did not almost do it, meaning they did it, but not really they did it. I mean, it's very confusing. And the Quran has a style. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us something that seems confusing, those of us who are trained smell immediately that there's some deliberate ambiguation. There's some deliberate ambiguation. So why? Now, before we do this, I want to show you what the translators and by default all the interpreters did with these three words. وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. As I said, the literal word-for-word translation does not make sense at all. It does not work. Even in Arabic, you don't use this type of composition. You don't say وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. You may say something else that we will see. So the translators, here's what they said. Marmaduke Pickthall said they sacrificed her, although almost they did not. So again, the concept is they almost did not do it. Abdullah Yusuf Ali, but not with goodwill. Arbery, a thing they had scarcely done. I don't know where he got that one from. Muhammad Asad, although they had almost left it undone. I don't know what that means. They slaughtered her, but they almost left it undone. And then Qadri said, though they did not look like doing it. How would you slaughter a cow but not look like doing it? Again, the concept is very confusing because the original itself is confusing. This is what I'm trying to prove. And by the way, the interpreters, the books of tafsir, are all over the place in trying to interpret these three words. وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. And so, as we see, all the translators translated it as if it were وَكَادُوا أَلَّا يَفْعَلُونَ. This is not how it was written in the Quran. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. It's a different structure altogether. So, I am aware, by the way, that this same structure, almost the same, appears in two other ayat, 1417 and 1893, and you can see the translation. It's dramatically different. There it's very clear, and you can allow for a specific interpretation based on the exact semantics in those ayat. With this one, you cannot do the same thing. So we are aware. Please don't write me in the comments about these two other ayat. We have studied this and we are very confident of what we're talking about. So what's the problem? The problem is they all followed al-ajila, the hurried interpretation, instead of taking the time to really reflect and analyze and come up with al-akhirah. Remember al-ajila and al-akhirah? We talked about them in the video that's labeled why only 5 fruits are mentioned in the Quran. So what is al-akhirah, which is the deliberate, diligent interpretation of 271? What is al-akhirah? فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. This is how we're going to start analyzing exactly what's going on. So all interpreters, every interpreter and translator, assume that the particle ma, in this ayah, وَمَا, this particle, means the negation conjunction, meaning not. So they started by thinking ma means not. So if you apply not to the verb kadu, they did not almost do. And that's where the confusion is. How do you almost not do something? So they almost did not do the slaughtering. It doesn't make sense. So the minute you start by assuming ahead of time that ma means a negation, you're already confused. Now, what happens if we reconsider that assumption? If we rethink it, and this is exactly the beauty of al-ajila, you have to consider all sorts of options. And these options sometimes are not trivial. They're not obvious. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may point them to you, and sometimes hundreds of people may read this ayah and they will never get it. So watch this, and this is so beautiful, so touching, and so significant and profound. If we realize that the particle ma occurs in Arabic as the relative pronoun, which is in Arabic means ism wasl. This ma means whatever. For example, when we say وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, to God belongs everything or whatever is in the heavens and the earth, or in the realms of understanding and in the scripture. Ma in this ayah, ma is a relative pronoun. It's ism wasl. It means whatever. Now, if we come and apply ma from that point of view to the interpretation of ayah 271, the confusion, like magic, totally disappears. So now we understand فَذَبَحُوهَا وَمَا كَادُوا. There's a comma here, right here. يَفْعَلُونَ. There's a comma. Okay, watch this. And they slaughtered her, and whatever they schemed in the past, وَمَا كَادُوا, whatever they schemed. The verb كَادَ also means to scheme, to plot, to create a sinister plan, to implement a tricky game. That's all kada. So the verb kada in this case, it's referring to what they did to Musa alayhi salam. And this is why we said at the beginning of the story that their game was not necessarily pure. They were not really seeking to be guided. They were playing an illicit game of some sort. They were tricky. They were trying to test Musa. They were not just pesky because they're ignorant. No, it's a lot more sinister than this. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed their plot using these three words at the very end of the story as an exercise. Did you guys get it, or did you not understand what they were doing? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us they were scheming in the past, in that story. That's why this story is told to us. Exactly. It is telling us that they were playing this type of games. With what? With the divine lexicon. With their dealings with their messengers. In their testing of the prophets that came to them. Every single case, they played a similar game. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us they schemed, they plotted, they played games, they played dirty. Not only this, يَفْعَلُونَ, they still do. So now, if you understand it this way, and by the way, between parentheses, I don't want to hear from any Arabic speaker who tells me it doesn't work. Go ask your professors in Arabic. Go read about the advanced books in Bayan and Badi'a, and you will know that this is the highest form of eloquence for expressing this exact same expression. And I'm going to give you direct evidence from examples that you are able to understand. So watch these examples. If I say مَشْتَرَوْا يَأْكُلُونَ, مَشْتَرَوْا يَأْكُلُونَ, it is very legitimate way of saying whatever they bought, they eat. They eat now whatever they bought. So in common English, I may say it in a slightly easier way to understand, where I say they eat whatever they bought. But it's very legitimate to say whatever they bought, they eat. مَشْتَرَوْا يَأْكُلُونَ. So in Arabic, I may say إِنَّهُمْ يَأْكُلُونَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَوْا, or إِنَّهُمْ يَأْكُلُونَ الَّذِي اشْتَرَوْا. That's legitimate. So if I flip them, it's even more eloquent. Another example, مَا زَرَعُوا يَحْصُدُونَ. Very legitimate Arabic, very eloquent Arabic, very expressive way of combining these words in a form of art. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the same kind of thing. وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ. Whatever, in here, the example I just gave, مَا زَرَعُوا يَحْصُدُونَ, whatever they sowed, they reap. We use it all the time. You reap what you sow. This is the exact same meaning written in a different way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ, whatever they schemed in the past, they are still doing. So all of a sudden, not only the confusion totally disappears, and the disagreements that we saw among the interpreters, among the translators, and the confusion and the inconsistency from the way it was expressed, all of these things disappear, and all of a sudden we have a brand new understanding. Not only this, but it's a very significant, sinister warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us, watch out. They're going to play games with the divine lexicon. Somebody is going to come and mess up how you understand the vocabulary, how you understand the Abrahamic locution, how you understand the very basis of the stories with which the stories are written. They will try to change these words. Be careful. They're still doing in the present tense, يفعلون, and يفعلون in the Quran generally implies true now at the time of revelation and true going forward. So whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us يفعلون, they're still doing it. Question is, are they doing it today? Did they do it a century ago? Did they do it 5 centuries ago? Did they do it 14 centuries ago when somebody took possession of the Islamic guidance and the Islamic tradition and started writing that tradition in accordance to what they want? You reflect on that and you think. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us whatever similar people have done in the past, they're still doing it. So we continue. Is this an imagined warning? Is this something we are imagining, or is the Quran confirming the same concept in other places? Let's look at this ayah, ayah 550. So ayah 550 starts by saying, وَأَنِ احْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ وَاحْذَرْهُمْ أَنْ يَفْتِنُوكَ عَنْ بَعْضِ مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ فَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَنْ يُصِيبَهُمْ بِبَعْضِ ذُنُوبِهِمْ وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ لَفَاسِقُونَ أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حُكْمًا لِقَوْمٍ يُوقِنُونَ. This is going to be long, but I need you to be patient because we really need to understand it in detail. So the translation goes, this is addressing our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also by extension all of us. Disseminate the linguistic discernment among them. وَأَنِ احْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ. احْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ means to judge among them or to show them the judgment, the right discernment, the right way of distinguishing between the various vocabulary. Disseminate linguistic discernment among them in accordance with what Allah has made accessible. And do not follow their opinions, i.e. their claims that are without evidence. We talked about this before. Ilm is defined as evidence-based knowledge. The opposite of ilm, according to the Quran, is what? Hawa. Hawa, the plural is ahwa. So always Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to ilm in the singular, ahwa in the plural, because ahwa are many different opinions with no basis, with no evidence. Evidence, of course, according to the sultan, the authoritativeness of the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, don't follow their many opinions. Don't follow their many claims that are given without evidence. So the fact that this person said it, or that person who lived close by to Medina or close by to the 1st century, or was one of this group of people, or of this kind of blue blood, we don't care about this. These are all opinions. What is the evidence? Is there evidence from the Quran? Are there the markings that we just saw that relate ayah 61 of Surah Al-Baqarah to ayah 67 very clearly? Did they notice these markings? Did they follow al-bayinat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in the Quran? If not, they're just hawa, opinions, empty words, guesses, fancy, nothing real. They're not evidence. The knowledge comes with the evidence. Otherwise, they are ahwa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ. Don't follow their opinions. You're not required to. You don't even have to dignify such opinions. And guard against them. وَاحْذَرْهُمْ. وَاحْذَرْهُمْ. Is this addressing Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Yes, it is. It is addressing Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Beware. Guard. Guard against what? lest they tempt you away from what Allah has made accessible for you. And يفتنوك, lest they tempt you or test you or try you or challenge you or even derail you, delude you from عن بعض ما أنزل الله إليك. Of course, with the case of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was ma'soom in the message. He was ma'soom in his role as a messenger. So this warning is not to the messenger Muhammad. It's not to the Rasul. This warning is to the Nabi, because the Nabi was tasked with interpreting and applying. So Allah was telling the Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, be careful that they put you through the same tribulations and trials and tests and tricks as they did with Musa alayhi salam. I hope this is clear. فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُصِيبَهُم بِبَعْضِ ذُنُوبِهِمْ. Now, if they reject your message and reject your attempts to explain and to provide this knowledge to them so that they can understand and reflect and engage and connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they reject, then know that Allah wants to burden them in accordance with some of their sins. For many people are indeed deviant. وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ لَفَاسِقُونَ. Many people are deviant. They deviate from the right way. It starts right here. وَأَنِحْكُمْ. Disseminate the linguistic discernment. Remember, the word hukum literally means linguistic discernment. Only that way. There is no other interpretation for it throughout the whole Quran. And we know this because in Surah Yusuf, Yusuf alayhi salam is talking to the two prisoners, and he says, "In hiya illa asma'un sammaytumuha." It is but labels, names, nouns, descriptors you created. Ma anzalallahu biha min sultan. Allah did not put any authoritativeness in such labels. Inil hukmu illa lillah. The linguistic discernment regarding these labels belongs but to Allah. So don't make up your own lexicon. Don't make up the language of the poets to be supreme, dominant, ruling, authoritative over the language of the Quran. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us in that part of Surah Yusuf. So we continue with the next ayah, and this is even more telling. أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ. Is it the linguistic discernment that's based on ignorance, jahiliyyah? And now we learn a new term of the Abrahamic locution. The word jahiliyyah does not mean before Islam. The word jahiliyyah means away from the Abrahamic locution lexicon. Let me repeat it because this is so significant. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us in this ayah, are they seeking the linguistic discernment of those who want to throw away the divine lexicon? This is jahiliyyah. So when someone insists on using the lexicon of the Arab poets instead of the Abrahamic locution, which is the divine lexicon, Allah is referring to it as al-jahiliyyah. Al-jahiliyyah. Think about this. Al-jahiliyyah. What is this? That means most of what was written in our tradition that assumes their own dictionary words and dictionary meanings is following the lexicon from Allah or following hukm al-jahiliyyah. I'll leave the answer to you. أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ. Is it the linguistic discernment that is based on ignorance, i.e. diversions from the divine lexicon, that they seek? وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حُكْمًا. And who, if not Allah, could be the source of linguistic discernment, insight? Remember, the word ahsan doesn't mean better. It is a more precise term that means the truth that's within something. So ahsan al-qasas are the stories that have a lot of truth inside them. Ahsan is more insightful, provides more insight. Compared to Allah, who could be the source of more insightful linguistic discernment? For whom? لِقَوْمٍ يُوقِنُونَ. For a community of people who are seeking yaqeen. Seeking yaqeen. Remember, we talked about this. When you see a verb, it doesn't mean they've already achieved it, especially in the present tense. Present tense indicates we're still seeking that certainty. So if you're seeking that certainty, where do you want to go better than the lexicon from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Hukm Allah. حكم Allah? Do you want to take حكم الجاهلية instead of حكم Allah? This is the question in this ayah. So now we come to gift number 3. Ayah 50 proves that our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a Nabi, not as a Rasul, was himself susceptible to the schemes of those who wanted to pervert the divine lexicon. I want you to think about this. He is not a Rasul in this ayah. The Rasul does not do interpretation. The Rasul does not get into the meanings of the message. Rasul only yuballigh, delivers. So who gets into the interpretation? Nabi. So our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a Nabi, in his role as a Nabi, was susceptible. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, وَاحْذَرْهُمْ, beware them, be careful of them. Don't allow them to trick you. Be careful. So if our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as a Nabi, again I keep repeating it, nobody should assume that we're talking about Rasul, a messenger. We're talking about the Nabi who is tasked with interpreting and coming up with interpretations and applications. If he himself was susceptible to their schemes, what about the companions? What about the tabi'een, those who followed them? What about the few generations that followed them? What about the rest of scholars in the last 14 centuries? Don't you think they were also susceptible? Do you think they were smarter than our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is warned to beware them, to beware those enemies? Think about this. Very significant, very serious. So ayah number 50 from Surah 5 tells us exactly how to be skeptical of anything we receive unless we have linguistic evidence from the Quran. So gift number 4, there is a new real Quranic science being exposed as we just did. So let me elaborate a little bit more, and we're going to discuss it a lot more in the coming segments, inshallah. The word I'm going to teach you here is the word tafsil. This is a new Quranic vocabulary about the methodology. And you all know this word. You all have learned about it by reading through the Quran. Tafsil. And it means the syntactic segmentation. What are we talking about? We're talking about when we dove into this clause, وَمَا كَادُوا يَفْعَلُونَ, which is a complete sentence. And we said, you have the choice of interpreting ma as a negative conjunction or negation conjunction, or you have the choice of interpreting ma as ism wasl, relative pronoun, meaning whatever. By doing this, you change the structure of the sentence. So if you consider ma a negation conjunction, that means not, that means they did not do kadu. If you change it into a whatever, now the meaning becomes whatever they schemed in the past, comma, they still do. In other words, وَمَا كَادُوا, there's a comma in here, يَفْعَلُونَ. You change the structure of the sentence. And by changing the structure of the sentence, you understood it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the new light to see it in a totally different way. In a way that is very consistent with the rest of the story. It makes perfect sense. It eliminates all the disagreements that people have had for 14 centuries. So this change of structure is called syntactic segmentation. How we segment the sentences changes their meanings. Remember, the Quran does not have punctuation. We don't have commas and periods and colon, etc., etc. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left it up to us to think and reflect. And with the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can find the right segmentation, the right structuring of the syntax, of the structure, of the composition of the words, right? If we do this correctly, we are doing tafsil. Why is this so important? Because without tafsil, we would not have understood ayah 271. So this is a new bayina, a new deduction technique we just used in interpreting ayah 271. And this is called tafsil. It is not about details or elaboration. So tafsil is not about elaborating the ayat or providing details or providing explanations. It has nothing to do with this. It's a methodological vocabulary. Remember, we said every methodology has to have several elements. One of them is the set of steps. One of them is vocabulary, the processes, the principles, the guidelines, etc., etc. Methodology has several elements. This is one of the elements of the Quranic methodology, something called tafsil. This is part of the vocabulary of the organic methodology for interpreting the Quran. So how do we know this, and where can we learn more about this? Watch this ayah, ayah 37 from Surah Yunus. And this is amazing. This is absolutely beautiful. وَمَا كَانَ هَذَا الْقُرْآنُ أَن يُفْتَرَى مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. This Quran, or the scriptural text, remember we said there's a difference between Quran, which is the text itself that we hold in our hands, versus Al-Kitab, which is a message that's layered in several layers of understanding. This Quran, the scriptural text, was never to be concocted by an intermediary between Allah and humans. It is not possible for any intermediary. And this eliminates all of the discussion that you see in some books of tafsir, that perhaps it is Jibreel who composed the Quran. They actually said that. There is a scholar, an old-time scholar called As-Samarqandi, who initially provided some sort of opinion regarding that. And it was repeated by Ar-Razi, repeated by Az-Zamakhshari, and As-Suyuti, and so on. So this original idea that possibly Jibreel is the one who composed it is totally refuted in this ayah. And had they read this ayah while understanding min dun correctly, they would not have even thought about that possibility. So this is another gift that's not even listed, and I ask you to really internalize these issues. Again, one more time, As-Suyuti, Ar-Razi, big names, all of them repeated that same possibility, where they refer this idea to the very first person who said it, which is As-Samarqandi. So this Quran cannot be concocted by any intermediary between Allah and humans, but the truthfulness of the one in whose hands it is, وَلَكِنْ تَصْدِيقَ الَّذِي بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ, and the syntactic segmentation, tafsil, of the sentences or the signs or the message itself. لا ريب فيه من رب العالمين. There is no doubt that it is coming from the Lord of all realms. We need to detail this a little bit, because the expression تصديق الذي بين يديه has two meanings that we need to be really, really careful about. So the first meaning, I put it out here, the truthfulness of the one in whose hands it is. That means our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The truthfulness of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam is directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning Allah testifies to the truthfulness. This is the first meaning, the obvious meaning, but there is a deeper meaning. And we understand this deeper meaning if we understand tafsil al-kitab, the segmentation of the syntax of the message of the Quran. In other words, understanding the message by doing different types of segmentation of the message, tafsil. That comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I explained, Allah needs to show you the light. You look at the text and you say, I can view this in a different perspective, and it changes the meaning totally, as we just did with ayah 271. So that segmentation light comes from Allah. And therefore, tasdeeq, meaning to believe in the Quran, also comes from Allah. So what is this saying? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this Quran will remain a question mark for the vast majority of people unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens their heart to see the evidence that leads them to reach the certainty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises in the Quran. So when we analyze all of these evidence, when we dig through all of these signs, when we make all of these links between the various stories and the various paragraphs and the various surahs, and we say it is impossible for a human being to have done this over the course of 23 years with full consistency, without any deviation from perfection, that is impossible for a human being. That certainty cannot come unless you really analyze, and you cannot analyze and see the signs unless Allah shows you the signs. So this is what this ayah is saying. This tasdeeq, that you reach, that you become a witness to the truthfulness of the Quran. That witnessing to the truthfulness of the Quran, of the thing that's in between your hands, that witnessing to its truthfulness is based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you. لا ريب فيه من رب العالمين. That it is sourced from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is profound. It says that you don't reach certainty unless you do this type of analysis, unless you apply this organic Quranic methodology. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, tafsil and tasdeeq come real time from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is knowledge provided by Allah, and we're going to see a little bit more in a couple of minutes if you stay with us until the end of this segment. By the way, if you are learning something useful and something beneficial, I hope you take a couple of seconds and click on the subscribe button, and you click on the red bell button to receive immediate notifications whenever we release anything new on this channel, and we thank you for that. So now we come to gift 5. As we said before, this is the marquee story in Surah Al-Baqarah. Musa was not using the Abrahamic locution because it relates to everyday speech, not scriptural interpretation or devotional supplication. This proves that their everyday language was different than the language of the scripture. Not only for them, but also it's a lesson for us. The language of the 7th century Arab poets, the everyday spoken Arabic, is not the same as the Abrahamic locution. And this is part of this ayah. I want you to pay attention to these 3 ayat from Surah Muhammad. Surah Muhammad, for those of you who don't know, includes evidence and details that came very late in the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the surah was revealed very late in his mission. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirms to us with the content of Surah Muhammad that Surah Muhammad came really late, and it came after the reversion or the conversion of the Quraysh to Islam. Now, I want you to pay attention because these 3 ayat are talking about this group of people, the people who converted from Quraysh. Watch this. In Surah 13 of Surah Muhammad, Surah 47, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing Qarya, and we said Qarya is the obstinate Qadri, the people who rejected initially. This is the people of Mecca before they became Muslims. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to قَرْيَتِكَ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَتْكَ, your Qadri or your town that has kicked you out. And by the way, between parentheses, many scholars keep talking about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrating. He did not migrate. He was kicked out of Mecca. He was forced out of Mecca. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this very clearly. أَخْرَجَتْكَ. It was not a voluntary migration. So we should never refer to the exit of our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam out of Mecca as hijrah, migration. It was not migration. He was forced out. He was pushed out by threats against his life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is confirming this. So قَرْيَتِكَ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَتْكَ, that group of people who kicked you out, who pushed you out of your own hometown. So this is ayah 13. Why is this important? Because in ayah 14, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them as اتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُم. They follow their opinions, as we just saw a little earlier in ayah 50 of Surah Al-Ma'idah. This is the description that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to this group of people. قَرْيَتِكَ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَتْكَ. And again, I don't want to go through a lot of details right now in this segment, but please go back and revisit and read on your own, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. And the important part is that in ayah 16, which is only 2 ayat later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to this exact same group. وَمِنْهُمْ, and from among them, from this group of people, قَرْيَتِكَ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَتْكَ. Remember, this is after they became Muslims. This is after the conquest of Mecca. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned to Medina, and some of them would come and visit the Muslims in Medina, and they would meet with our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the scene that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us about them, about this group of people, the Quraysh people who converted to Islam. وَمِنْهُمْ, and among them, meaning the late Quraysh reverts, are some who listen to you talk. مَنْ يَسْتَمِعُ إِلَيْكَ, they listen to you as you talk. حَتَّى إِذَا خَرَجُوا مِنْ عِنْدِكَ, but when they exit from your gatherings, meaning they were meeting with you and they leave the meetings. حتى إذا خرجوا من عندك قالوا, they say, who? These same people. منهم من يستمع إليك, from these people who are following their whims, their opinions, their unevidenced type of information and claims. قريتك التي أخرجتك, the same group of people who caused him to exit. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing them. قالوا للذين أوتوا العلم, when they exit from your gathering, they say to those who have been given the evidence-based knowledge. Who are these? These are the close companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Watch this question they ask. قالوا للذين أوتوا العلم ماذا قال آنفا, what did he just say? Think about this. What did he just say? What did he just say? You're speaking your language supposedly. What do you mean, what did he just say? Are you so confused about the language he's using in the Quran so that you admit you don't understand it? What did he just say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues just to confirm what we've been saying on this channel, that this is the same group of people who took possession of Islam and changed it in the ways that we just described from Surah Al-Baqarah with the story of the cow. Those are the ones whose cores, قُلُوبُهُمْ, Allah has imprinted with an unchanging disposition, and they follow their opinions, i.e. claims without evidence. أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ طَبَعَ اللَّهُ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has imprinted their cores with an unchanging disposition. In other words, the disposition they had before they converted did not change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us this. This is the Quran speaking. This is not Dr. Hani making claims. This is the Quran in front of your eyes exposing this same group of people who eventually took possession of the state of Muslims after Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anh, and they became the Umayyad. This is the same group of enemies that caused our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be pushed out of Mecca. These are the same people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing them as اتبعوا أهواءهم, they follow their opinions and they don't understand what our beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to say, and they continue to follow their opinions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has imprinted upon their hearts with the seal of unchanging disposition. Very significant, very serious information. So now we continue with gift number 6. This story has nothing to do with sacrifice, as we were told in the interpreter's tafsir books. Has nothing to do with the nagging and peskiness by Bani Israel regarding some of the details of what cows are halal to them and what cows are haram to them. None of this stuff. This story has nothing to do with using parts of the cow to throw at a dead person to bring him back to life, as some tafsir books have told us, which is the ayah 72-73 of Surah Al-Baqarah, and they related the two stories in a way that absolutely brings no evidence whatsoever to their claims. None of these things are included in the story that we just described. They have nothing to do with the real story of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us a linguistic lesson about the Abrahamic locution and the methodology. And now we come to gift number 7, the last 3 words of the story of the cow, meaning the last 3 words in ayah 71, represent an exercise. As we saw, such exercises are numerous in the Quran. There are tons of such exercises in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala includes all sorts of references, and He shows you, okay, I just gave you an example. Did you pick it up? I just gave you a challenge. Are you going to stop and think about it? I just asked you a question. Are you going to reflect about it? And then I gave you an example of something I just talked about. Consider it, and so on and so forth. All over the Quran. They are practical lessons for you to practice the Quranic methodology and the Abrahamic locution. How many interpreters have told you this? How many interpreters have even paid attention to the methodology existing within the Quran, let alone the exercises to apply the methodology? And then the final question that I want you to think about and be honest with yourself: did the interpreters and the translators succeed in this exercise? Did they pass that test? Gift number 8, the last 3 words represent a warning to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is illustrating to us the deviousness of Musa's followers during his days, and they continue to do so, as we just saw in the interpretation of Ayah 71. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning us there will be the same schemes and plots to delude us Muslims from the correct usage of the Abrahamic locution. And gift number 9, which is the most beautiful, and I left it to make it a positive closure because it's really, really amazing. And inshallah, it will leave you with an overwhelming sense of joy. If you stayed with us throughout this whole segment and you really enjoyed and tasted the beautiful fruits that we shared from the various paragraphs in this segment, I hope you get to really appreciate this beautiful gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We talked about tafsil, which is the syntactic segmentation that we just described. And again, we're going to cover a lot more about this going forward in future segments, inshallah. Tafsil, according to the Quran, is about segmenting these ayat and these sentences and these structures into different types of combinations so that you can understand them in fresh ways, in new ways that nobody has seen before, as we just did with Ayah 71. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Yunus tells us that He, Allah, يُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides this syntactic segmentation to people who are seeking the evidence for knowledge. The question is, the verb in here is what? It's present tense. Present tense. That means if you have been with us through this segment and you caught on to the concept and you understand how we segmented Ayah 71, the last 3 words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has just done so for your heart, for your core, for your qalb. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has just given you this realization. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did it real time, yufassilu, present tense. You don't believe me? Watch the next ayah, it's even more clear. Next ayah from Surah Ar-Ra'd, number 13, ayah number 2. الله الذي رفع السماوات بغير عمد ترونها ثم استوى على العرش وسخر الشمس والقمر كل يجري لأجل مسمى. I'm not going to translate all of this because it's just too long for this segment and I want to close. But it's talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then it comes to this sentence. يُدَبِّرُ الْأَمْرَ يُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ. He manages the affairs and He does the syntactic segmentation. Beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is managing the affairs, we all know, constantly, non-stop, continuously, no interruption, real time, managing everything in the affairs of this life, of this world, of this universe. Exactly the same verb tense, yufassilu al-ayat, is attached to the same level of majestic role, majestic function, tadbirul amr, managing the affairs of this whole universe. He's also doing the segmentation for you. So when you're engaging the Quran and you start analyzing the different ways of segmenting the sentences and the clauses and changing the configurations so you understand them in new lights, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is right there with you. Right there with you. So next time you read Surah Al-Alaq, Iqra wa Rabbuka al-Akram, read and you are in the company of your Lord. This is exactly the beautiful message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is leaving us when we discuss tafsil and we understand the concept of tafsil as something real time happening to you when you engage the Quran. I hope you are convinced to never let go of the Quran, to stay so close to the Quran all the time and to engage this way so you are in the company of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as often as you can. And finally, in the conclusion, in the style of Ayah 271, as we just did the segmentation for it, I tell you, those who are muttaqun toil the divine lexicon and follow the evidence-based knowledge to engage the Quran, but those who won't follow opinions. So this comma right here, if you take it out, the meaning totally changes. If you keep the comma, you understand exactly what I just said. I hope that you are among the muttaqun who toil the divine lexicon and who follow the evidence-based knowledge, inshallah, as you engage the Quran. I thank you for staying with us. I really hope that you can subscribe if you have not done so. If you are already subscribed, please click on the red bell button, and I ask you that you like and you comment in a respectful way and you share with as many people as possible. We come to the dua that we close with, Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah laqad ja'at rusul rabbina bil haqq. I thank you very much for watching. Assalamu alaikum.